Today I just wanted to quickly go over some of the details that we got in today's Scarlet and Violet trailer for the DLC. Now we got some decent information, nothing too crazy, but enough to tide us over, I suppose, for the time being. So let's just go through some of the information that they've got on the official website. They have some screenshots here from the trailer, which is a lot easier to show you guys than actually pulling up the trailer because I don't want to get copyright striked or anything. I did think it was interesting in the Teal mask that we've got this marsh area. It sort of reminds me of the Great Marsh from Sinnoh. And so it's possible we could see some other marsh Pokemon from that game, like Scorpy and Drapion, right? Those could be in the game. Some approximation of that. And just knowing that we have a marsh biome could help us decide what other Pokemon might be coming back. But my purpose in this video today is not to speculate on that. I sort of liked how the marsh looked compared to Sinnoh's Great Marsh. I think it's nice to be able to see a marsh come to life. Now, besides that, I didn't really find anything from the Teal mask that interesting to look at. And then when we come down to the Blueberry Academy and the Terrarium in the second half of the DLC for Indigo Disc, in terms of what there is to look at, I think the most interesting thing is we've got this terrarium here, and it's got 4 different areas, and the 4 different areas are artificially created, apparently. What looks funny to me is this reminds me of Heart Gold, Soul Silver, when you had the Safari Zone there, and you had all the different elements you could sort of stick together, and depending on which ones you stuck together where, you would get certain Pokemon to be attracted, and if you used them for a certain amount of number of days, then you could get more rare Pokemon to spawn. Which is sort of an annoying mechanic, I'm not gonna lie. And I don't think that will be at play here. I think that we may just be stuck with these 4 artificially created zones, and the zones are meant to be artificial looking, but they're not using this opportunity to allow us to rearrange them or swap out different ones. I think it is just what it is, which is fine. It looks sort of cheap, and frankly, I think it sort of is just cheap. It's sort of an interesting concept, I suppose, but I feel like it's a concept bred out of necessity, where they said, we don't want to have to design an entire island like we did in the previous game, where we can get all sorts of different varieties of Pokemon. Let's just stick them in 4 zones, put it together, and say we did that on purpose. That's my personal opinion. Anyway, if we look at the rest of the screenshots from this DLC, at the very least, what we were shown is basically just close-ups of those 4 zones, right? So there doesn't seem to be much going on in the Indigo Disc, at least not immediately. We've got pictures of the Pokemon in each of the zones, and then this here, even, I'm not sure exactly where this is, but I feel like this area might be more or less where we actually spend most of the time for this game, or for this DLC specifically. The first DLC seemed to be more story focused, right? You're going to this festival, you've got the three guys and the extra dude, and you've got to fight them maybe, or fight the one dude with these guys' help, or something like that. But this definitely has a story arc that's visible and understandable. This one here seemed to be more about battling. We saw some double battles, and if we actually go to the video, we can see one thing that we did find out, or that a lot of people have noticed, is that we've got Melodic here. And Melodic appears to be using the move Scald, which is pretty noteworthy because Scald hasn't been available to any water types. So it would make a lot of sense if this DLC it comes out and comes with move tutors, right? A lot of times the 3rd installment in the series, right? Be it either Emerald or Platinum. Otherwise, you could have the remakes of the gen, sort of like Oras did, compared to X and Y, since they didn't have Z come out. Those games usually come out with some kind of move tutors that'll expand the moves allowed for Pokemon in that generation. And so it would make a lot of sense if we got move tutors in this game as well. We did in the previous game as in Sword and Shield, we got move tutors, and they were more unique move tutors, as opposed to this one where it would just be, hey, you want to be able to teach Scald to your Pokemon? But just being able to teach Scald to water types would be pretty big. And so we don't know, of course, if Melodic will actually get to have Scald by the time the game comes out, because we saw the move Return being used in a previous trailer for either this game or one of the other ones, I don't remember. But just because we see something in the trailer doesn't mean it'll actually be like that by the time the game comes out. And it could be the Melodic only gets Scald, although I strongly doubt that. But at the very least, that is something to note. But they were using a lot of, here we go. And so we can see that though there are a lot of double battles in this particular DLC, the Indigo Disc. So I think this DLC will be focused more on double battles and sort of the battle tower. So not really my cup of tea so much, because I don't really like those endgame grinds as much, especially ones that are just gauntlets of random battles. But they did seem to have some unique characters, so at least when you're fighting them, there'd be some novelty there. And it is nice to see double battles being represented in the games, because if you're going to make your main competition be based off of double battles, then it would be good to actually have some in the game. So that's cool, even though we can see here that they're breaking species clause for whatever that's worth. All right, let's move on a bit to the next point I want to talk about, which is the 3 legendaries. You've got Okidogi, Monkey and Pheasantipede, and they all have an ability that has been shown off, and that ability is called Toxic Chain. Toxic Chain brings to mind poison typing, so it is seeming more likely that these Pokemon will have the poison typing. Maybe they'll have a secondary typing, poison flying or something. Seems most obvious here. And then who knows for the rest of these guys. But poison typing is probable. Toxic Chain, what does it do? Well, it shows it down here. If I am Pheasantipede in this instance, I'm attacking the Meowscarada, I have a chance to badly poison my opponent. Now, bad poison, of course, is toxic poison, is not normal poison. And that is a big difference from Poison Touch. We also see that they use an Air Slash, which is a non-contact move. So that's noteworthy as well. That it can be just any move now. I will get a toxic poison on you. Now, there's a couple things to note about this. First of all, what's the percentage chance? If it's a 10% chance, well, then that's not really that big of a deal. If it is a 30% chance, like Poison Touch, though, then that's actually huge. Because if I have moves with other secondary effects, they can get those secondary effects as well. So Air Slash, for instance, could flinch. And so, besides the fact that Meowscarada is weak to Air Slash, I would have to fear the flinch. And then after that, I'd also have to fear getting poisoned for free. So I want to talk a bit about this ability, this Toxic Chain ability, because it's a lot more powerful than Poison Touch. And I want to talk about what kind of role these Pokemon could get put into. So let's go over to the team builder real fast. Now let's look at Sneasler. So Sneasler right now has the ability Poison Touch. And Poison Touch is sometimes ran on Sneasler with like Fake Out, U-Turn, Close Combat, and then Dire Claw. So this would be an example of a Sneasler set that could be running around right now with Poison Touch. Don't know if that's the optimal Sneasler, but that is an option. Fake Out gets you turns to waste for like when you're fighting against Drain or against Trick Room, and also just is free chip that's basically guaranteed against all Pokemon except for like ghosts or whatever. And you get to just say, hey, I've got a 30% chance on this turn poison you and you can't attack me. So even though Fake Out is not the most powerful move, you can still have that ability, which is decently strong. And so Sneasler is able to spread status throughout the party. However, this says a 30% chance of poisoning is normal poison. And normal poison is an interesting status compared to the bad poison, because on the one hand, if my opponent switches in and then switches out, I'm actually doing more damage with poison than I am with toxic, because it'll do more damage on the first turn. However, if my opponent wants to stay in on multiple turns, then very quickly toxic will out damage. So if Sneasler could badly poison, it would still prefer to do that. And if you could do that with physical and special moves, well, then that would be fantastic as well. So Toxic Chain, is that what it's called? Just to make sure I got that right. Yeah, Toxic Chain is basically a straight upgrade to Poison Touch, assuming that you still have a 30% chance. If it's more than a 30% chance, then that's really crazy. Now, another Pokemon that runs Poison Touch would be Muck, or Alolan Muck specifically. And, I've got Poison Jab, it's got a percent chance to poison. And I've got Poison Touch, and that's got another percent chance to poison. Interestingly, with Toxic Chain, because that's bad poison versus Poison Jab, which is a normal poison, if you're looking for just any kind of poisoning, then I suppose you could still stack those. But if you were looking to specifically get a bad poison, then maybe you wouldn't want to use Poison Jab. But if these Pokemon are, as we suspect, part poison type, right? This being a special attacker, seemingly wouldn't necessarily have that, besides Sludge Bomb. If this gets Sludge Bomb and then goes for the Toxic Chain again, then you have a 30% chance for bad poison, 30% chance for normal poison. Now, would they want that? I don't know. Maybe you run Hurricane, U-Turn, Heat Wave if you get it, and then Rooster or Sludge Bomb. I don't know what you'd run. And then these two guys, we don't know what their secondary typings would be. But if they're normal poison, something poison, and they seem to be physically offensive, then you could imagine one of them running Poison Jab and being in a similar position, or you could see running Gunk Shot as well. And Gunk Shot does have a poison chance, but it's much lower, and it's about the same chance that you miss. So more often you'd be getting a Toxic Chain ability. You wouldn't have to worry about that quite as much if you were running Gunk Shot. Now, one thing I think is going to happen with these guys is the ability to spread Toxic is really invaluable when it comes to being a fast poison type that can get in, get out real fast. So you could be a bulky guy, maybe this Ogie Dogie guy is more of a bulky looking fellow. So if you're bulky, maybe you could be more like the Muck. But the monkey looks pretty fast, and the bird looks pretty fast. I'm guessing it's going to be more along this line. And if I can come in, U-turn out, and if my U-turns can poison you, and my knockoff, if they get knockoff, like the monkey might get a knockoff, right? And then if that can go for knockoff, or some other annoying move, and suddenly I'm spreading status across the entire team, then really, that's really annoying. And I think it would be sort of like Sneasler or Beedrill. Beedrill doesn't have the poison going, but it's a very strong Pokemon. These are legendaries, so we're expecting them to be decently strong. And it will be able to pivot a lot. A lot of pivoting is going to be happening, I'm assuming, with these guys, especially the monkey and maybe the bird as well. We shall see what moves they get. One thing to note about these guys is that something like Toxapex is just going to completely shut them down. Alright, Toxapex is another poison type. Steel types would also be sort of annoying, but I think the poison types are going to be the most annoying because you just can't poison them. And if one of them is poison fighting, which is decently likely, I think one of these two guys could be poison fighting. Well, poison resists both of those, whereas steel would be weak to the fighting move, right? So poison type is going to come in, not going to care. Poison dark, same thing, don't really care, although still would be just as good for that. And so you can see those kinds of typings rise up in popularity. And of course, if these guys are really annoying in the metagame, we'll just run one of them. These are also poison types. So if poison types become more prevalent as a result, then having the ability to poison on command, is that really that valuable? Well, it still is pretty useful, but if you consider Beedrill, if I said Beedrill, do you want to have Toxic Chain or do you want to have adaptability? Beedrill wants adaptability 100% of the time because it wants damage output. And you could look at these guys and say, okay, he looks strong. Maybe the bird has a decent special attack stat. Monkey, I don't know how strong you are. Maybe you got like 110 attack stat. I wish you had more attack. Well, what if he's got contrary and superpower, maybe? Or what if he's got some other really good abilities, a hidden ability, and that would be a lot more valuable. Now, they don't necessarily have to have hidden abilities. Something like Urshifu doesn't have a hidden ability. Urshifu only has one ability. And it's not like anybody's complaining about that because its ability is fantastic. But as opposed to something like Heatran, which has two abilities it can choose from, or even the Tapus. Tapu Lele, right, could run telepathy. Never would, but it could. And if these guys have a hidden ability, if it's a good hidden ability, I could see them still foregoing the toxic chain. They get some more power, but we shall see. Anyway, enough talking about those guys. Let's talk about the returning Pokemon. So we've got in the Teal Mask, we've got a list here that Cerebi started collating, and we're just going to go over some of the Pokemon that I want to talk about real fast. So we've got the three poison guys right here, and Ogerpon is the fourth guy who's the star of the show. People are saying maybe these three guys have to fight Ogerpon, and if Ogerpon is a grass fairy, then these three being poison, that would make sense type-wise. That's not really that important at the moment. Let's look at the returning Pokemon, which we do know something about. Ninetales is pretty important, as is Vulpix. Vulpix is good for Little Cup, because Little Cup does not have Sun right now. Sun is really bad. So we have Charmander. They say nothing of Capsicid, but Sun really has had a hard time taking off at all in Little Cup, and having Vulpix back will change that entirely. That being said, it could either be still underwhelming or it could be broken and then get banned. I don't know how that will swing. It's always volatile to see Vulpix in Little Cup. Ninetales is strictly inferior to Torkoal in just about every way, and so it usually gets relegated to the lower tiers, and once again, it either gets banned or it struggles. And so we'll see where that lands. But Pokemon like Scovillain, similar to Capsicid and Little Cup, Scovillain is not really the strongest Pokemon with manual Sun, because you have to waste so many turns getting manual Sun, getting it set up. And Scovillain wants to be able to come in, punch holes, get out, and not have to worry about losing that Sun that you had to fight for. It may still not be enough to help Scovillain, but having Ninetales in the lower tiers means that there is a Sun user in the lower tiers that Scovillain can have access to, and could be very useful for him. And there's a bunch of other guys down there besides that will also appreciate lower tier Sun. We don't have lower tier Rain at the moment because Politoed's not in the game, and Hail or Snow in this generation hasn't really been doing that great. It has its times here and there, but it's not really that great. And Sand actually has been pretty abysmal, at least like Sand as a strat, right? Nobody's using strats with Sandaconda or with Hippowdon. It's just an added bonus if you have a rock type like Trainitar. But that's about it. Snorlax is good to see back. It's always nice to have a special tank, and Snorlax fits that quite nicely. I'm a big fan of Furt. Really bad and competitive, but boy, is he cute. And let's see, anybody else? Yeah, and Mega is cool to see back. We didn't get him in the previous gen, so it'll be nice to see him. Gliscor is one of the big guys I want to talk about here. So let's talk about Gliscor and compare him to all the other ground types. So we can go back here, go to this list. All right, so we got Landorus, Gliscor, Great Tusk. Landorus, of course, in previous generations was often the most used Pokemon of the OU tier, because Landorus has a fantastic typing and a great move pool with a really useful ability, and the ability to EV a bunch of different stats and either be fast and offensive, be physically tanky, be especially tanky. Right? It's got so many options. And now Great Tusk has come and supplanted Landorus as the premier ground type. And this is due to a couple of reasons. First of all, Landorus does not get knockoff, it doesn't get defog, it doesn't get toxic. It has some new moves that are cool, like of course it got Sandseer Storm, and like its nasty plot, so it can do some interesting stuff. It also got Taunt, which is quite nice, and it got Terror Blast for flying. But when it comes to why people use Landorus, they didn't use Landorus for its offensive capabilities. Even when in Gen 7 it had Supersonic Sky Strike, they didn't use it then for its offensive capabilities. The only time really, maybe in Gen 5, I don't know. But besides that, the only time Landorus has ever really been used for its offensive capabilities was in Gen 8 when Dynamax meta was around, because then you could spam Supersonic Max Airstream, get speed, and also boost your SPDEF with Max Quake, and it was just not a good time during the Dynamax meta. So that was basically one of the few times where Landorus actually was used offensively, specifically. But other than that, normally Landorus gets its insane usage from its defensive sets or its utility. Even when I'm running a Scarf Landorus and it's ostensibly an offensive Landorus, I still want to be able to have knockoff as an option, or even Stealth Rock as an option. And in a lot of metagames, Scarf Lando isn't even particularly that strong. So I think you really want to look at Landorus and say, okay, well, why do I want to use Landorus when I can use Great Tusk? Great Tusk, if we compare 145, 131, Great Tusk is a little bit weaker, but and it doesn't have Intimidate, but that HP stat plus defense stat means it's going to take a lot more physical hits. Lando's still going to tank special hits better, but that's about it. And speed stats, they're pretty comparable. I mean, that base 91 is nice for outspeeding base 90s, but that's also assuming that you're invested, which Landorus almost never is. So we're not going to worry about that. Great Tusk has Rapid Spin, which ameliorates that speed problem, and you can still get your knockoff. You can the Rapid Spin not only helps you with your speed, but is the is the way to get rid of hazards in this generation. I have Earthquake and Knockoff to scare the best defog blocker in Golden Go, and you have a bunch of other options as well, like Ice Spinner, which in yesterday's video I said I didn't like as an option, but it is an option that you have to respect on Great Tusk. And even weird stuff like Play Rough if you so desire. You can also use Great Tusk as a rocker. So people were using Landorus before with Earthquake, U-Turn, Toxic, and Knockoff. And then maybe instead of one of these moves, you'd put Stealth Rock or Defog, one of those two moves, right? That's how Landorus was being used like 85% of the time or whatever it was. Then you could see a random Scarf Landorus, or maybe a dual Dance Landorus if you want to be really cheeky. But really this is how Landorus was being used. Earthquake and U-Turn is still there, but you don't have Toxic, you don't have Knockoff, and you don't have Defog. So you can run Stealth Rock, right? You can still get Stealth Rock, and you can still put a last move on here, whatever that happens to be. Maybe Taunt, or, whatever, man. Just put something on there. You can still run a decent Landorus, but you need to have some form of hazard removal. If you don't have hazard removal, you're going to face a Samurott. You're going to face so many other Pokemon that can set Spikes or Stealth Rock in this metagame, and there are very limited options in OU that are viable for hazard removal. Right, you've got something like Corviknight, which is a decent defogger. It's blocked by Golden Go, but if your opponent doesn't have a Golden Go, then you're still probably fine. Great Tusk is the premier and best in slot remover of hazards in OU, right? If I have a hazard-based team, I'm almost certainly going to have a Golden Go. So Corviknight, despite Defog being great and Corviknight being great, he's going to have a very hard time defogging against that team. Gholdengo can't even be trapped by Magnezone or anything like that. So it's not like you can just slap a mag on the team and trap it and then be done. Right? You have to somehow pressure the Gholdengo to come in, then kill it without dying to spikes the entire time. And then you can get your defog off. Or you can just run Great Tusk. And it seems like Great Tusk is a good option. So, Great Tusk is a bulky ground type. Landorus is a bulky ground type. I don't need two bulky ground types on my team. Of course, they don't have the same typing, but, it's still that ground typing, and I don't want to be super weak to Rain or some of the other Pokemon out there like Baxcalibur. And Terra typings are out there, I suppose, so if you want to commit to terastallizing one of these guys, then I guess you could run both. But Landorus' time as the #1 Pokemon in OU is well and truly over. Let's talk about Gliscor. At this point you're wondering, what did this have to do with the DLC? Gliscor has to do with the DLC. Gliscor is coming back in DLC Wave 1, which is this fall. Now, what does this fall mean? As far as I know, it could mean all the way till Christmas. But let's just pretend it's coming in October. So I think that's when it'll be, is October. Maybe September, but probably October. And maybe as late as November, but I'm guessing October. And if we look at this, what do we get? Well, we don't know, because how would we know? It's not out yet, and we can't data mine something that's not out. But we can guess, based off of previous games, what Gliscor is going to get. So let's look at Generation 7 Gliscor. We're going to assume that if it's not in the leveling up list, then it might not come back. Aside from things like Earthquake, which, it's going to get Earthquake. Okay. So one thing we can see right off the bat is we've got the Elemental Fangs that are level 1. And that's always been the case for Gliscor, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm assuming that those are coming back. The only one that's really relevant at all is Ice Fang, which is occasionally ran on Gliscor, and you have to respect that option. But it's not a common move for it to run. But what else do we see here? But at level 1 we got Knockoff. Knockoff, of course, is that big move that you really want to have on your Pokemon if you can have it. Decently rare, and if you can offer Knockoff to the team, then you automatically have more value as a Pokemon. Not only is it a level 1 move, but it's also a level 10 move. So really Knockoff just comes with the Gligar and Gliscor line. So probably going to get a lot Knockoff. Acrobatics is another big move that it can get, and Swords Dance and U-Turn. So we can run the Swords Dance set. We got the Knockoff. Earthquake, like I said, we're going to assume it gets Earthquake. Now, we can see that Toxic is on here, but we're not going to assume you get Toxic. So similar to Landorus, Toxic is out because it's not a level up move. If it's not a level up move, I'm assuming you don't get it because most Pokemon nowadays don't get Toxic anymore. Another decent move that you can run is Facade, and Facade is a TM for this game, so I will assume you also get Facade. So you can run SD Facade, and that's a pretty good option. Now, you are a Pokemon that should be able to roost. I see that it's not in the level ups, but I believe it should still be able to roost. So that should be fine. Now I come down here to the breeding section, and I don't really see anything here that particularly matters. So that's fine. And then we come down here to the tutor section, and I'm just going to assume that none of these moves you're going to get. So we see Defog was also a tutor move. So I'm assuming you don't get Defog as Gliscor. So if we look at Roost for Gliscor, it doesn't actually get Roost now that I'm looking at it. And the reason for that is because Roost was only a TM move for Gliscor, and it doesn't get it by breeding or by level up. And Roost is not a TM in Gen 9. And so unless they add Roost as a egg move specifically, or I suppose they could add it as a level up move, and it's actually decently possible that Gliscor doesn't get Roost. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that. Let's go back to our list. Even if Gliscor doesn't get Roost, and it doesn't get defog, and it doesn't get toxic. It still has about the same amount of tools to work with as Landorus plus knockoff. Right, Landorus doesn't get knockoff, but I can run Earthquake, I can run U-turn, I can run Stealth Rock. Don't have Taunt, but I have knockoff, which a lot of people would say is better. And in addition to that, I have other moves like Facade, which I will be running all of the time. I could even run Terra Normal Facade if I really wanted to, although I don't think that would be the best idea. And even Ice Fang if I really needed to. Another good set would be SD Acro, because if Great Tusk is around, Great Tusk could run Ice Spinner. That would be something that it could continue to run, and it would hit Gliscor for a lot. But if I Terra Flying, I'm only 2 times weak to it. I am decently bulky, right? Look at that 125 defense stat. So Terra Flying, suddenly I'm only 2 times weak. It's not that big of a deal. I'm 95 base speed, so with only a minimal investment, I can probably outspeed most Great Tusks that aren't like max speed or Scarf. And I can then blow them away with +2 acrobatics. But what's going to distinguish Landorus and Gliscor? Why would I want to run Gliscor over Landorus? Besides knockoff, because knockoff is a good thing, but Landorus has Intimidate and has Taunt, so it's not like it doesn't have other things over Gliscor. Well, one thing that Gliscor does have, and this is a big deal, is Poison Heal. So we just got over talking about how we're going to have 3 new legendaries, and they have this ability with whatever move they use to badly poison you. And if you don't have a poison type or a steel type on your team, all your team's going to get poisoned. Well, what if I told you that there's a Pokemon that can heal passively from poison and actually wants to be poisoned? Not only that, but it's a ground type, so it's going to resist the poison type moves thrown at it. And if one of the legendaries happens to be a fighting type as well, well, I'm a flying type and I can resist that too. Suddenly, Gliscor becomes really useful. Compare that to Landorus or to Great Tusk. Lando, Great Tusk. What happens to both of them? They get U-turned. They get chipped down by knockoff from the monkey or from, well, to say nothing of the bird with Air Slash for Great Tusk. All of a sudden, these guys get toxicked, maybe lose their item. They're not recovering. They're going to die a slow, painful death. Gliscor is over here and getting super leftovers from Poison Heal. So it wants to get poisoned. So you're telling me there's these 3 Pokemon that are going to be really annoying and poisoning everybody, and I've got a guy in the back who just wants to be poisoned? Well, that seems really useful. So maybe Gliscor won't get Roost. We're not sure about that. And maybe it doesn't have Toxic and Defog. That's unfortunate. But it still has the ability to Poison Heal. Now, Gliscor fills the role of a bulky ground type. You're never, ever going to run Gliscor plus Landorus. Why would you ever run both of these Pokemon? They share the same exact typing, 4 times weak to Ice. And they both fill basically almost identical niches. So if I had to choose one, Landorus or Gliscor, Gliscor has passive recovery, and potentially it has Roost. It has Knockoff, which is a very useful move, and has a built-in flying type move that it can use on Great Tusk. So that's pretty good. Landorus, if it wants to hit Great Tusk, has to use Terra Flying, which commits it to using Terra Flying, and otherwise just has to U-turn out, hope that it's not Rocky Helmet Great Tusk, or Earthquake it for like 25% or something weak like that. And I think Gliscor is going to be a lot better overall compared to Landorus. If, therefore, Great Tusk is the premier rapid spin user in the tier, is still going to see tremendous amount of usage, despite having 2 competing ground types in the tier. Landorus doesn't really have anything over these 2 guys. It's going to get poisoned. It doesn't have recovery, and it doesn't have knockoff or toxic or defog like it did in the previous generation. So if I have to choose a ground type for my team, why would I choose Landorus? What does this have these two don't? Intimidate, I guess. But really, Intimidate, how many times is that useful over just having innate bulk like Great Tusk has, or passive recovery like Gliscor has? I think that a lot of the times Intimidate is used nowadays to try to stop a dragon dancing Pokemon from sweeping you. But half the time that doesn't even work out because then they just go for Dragon Dance again. So I don't really like Landorus currently, and I don't think that it's going to see a lot of usage. Will it be UU? I don't know. It depends a lot on what Gliscor has, but assuming it has Roost, I think it almost certainly will be UU or UBL, because Gliscor then just does everything Landorus can do and better. And then Great Tusk is still Great Tusk. Iron Treads isn't even on this conversation because it's going to be UU, even without DLC. But there's a good chance that Iron Treads goes down. The only way Iron Treads doesn't fall to UU, or stay in UU rather, is if Coco comes back. But Coco coming back is an entirely different can of worms that we are not prepared to discuss in this video. Let's quickly discuss the rest of the bulky ground types. We've got Garchomp, who's already in danger of falling down to UU, which is an insane thing to say. But really, Garchomp doesn't do anything. As a bulky ground type, the Great Tusk doesn't do better. Garchomp doesn't have any recovery outside of Rest, and to be truthful, Garchomp has ran Rest in the past, but I mean, Great Tusk could do the same thing if it really needed to. And you have the Rough Skin Rocky Helmet combination, but that's not the most valuable thing compared to having Rapid Spin and Knockoff all on a Pokemon. And being able to beat other really big, prominent, tier-defining threats like King Gambit. Garchomp doesn't have Scale Shot like it did in the previous generation, so there's no way to boost your speed. And it still struggles with the other ground types in the tier coming in and being bulky and ice spinnering or knocking it off or doing any number of annoying things. So Garchomp doesn't really fit in the OU tier, especially when you say, I need a bulky ground type. What bulky ground type am I going to choose? I'm going to choose Great Tusk. End of story. Because Great Tusk is one of the best Pokemon ever created. Tinglu. Tinglu is one of the Beasts of Ruin or whatever they're called. And the other two got banned to Ubers. But Tinglu, and then, Wo-Chen is there too. But Tinglu is not really seeing that much usage, despite being practically unkillable. Why is that? Well, because I need a bulky ground type. What am I going to use? I'm going to use Great Tusk. End of story. Tinglu has Whirlwind and Dual Hazards and Earthquake and Ruination and Throat Chop. Okay, we're going to use Great Tusk. Moving on. We got Clodsire. Clodsire does see usage, both because of its Water Absorb and its Unaware abilities. And Clodsire is adorable. But unless you specifically are weak to water, or you are weak to setup, then Clodsire doesn't really offer you terribly much compared to some of these others. Clodsire does have Toxic, right? And it does have Recovery, and Earthquake, and whatever last move you want to run, like Stealth Rock or whatever. So Clodsire as a bulky ground type actually does have the tools to succeed. We've got Toxic, which is a super rare thing to have. We've got a recovery move. We've got Earthquake. We're the only Pokemon on this list that has recovery. So that says something. And we've got Toxic, the only Pokemon on this list that has Toxic. So that's fantastic. But we also don't have a lot of the other tools that these guys have. We are also quite slow and passive. And a lot of times that allows Pokemon to set up on us. And sure, if you're unaware, then that's not the biggest deal. But on the other hand, if you aren't unaware, then that is a big deal. A lot of times you can get stalled out by Toxapex as well, or other Pokemon like that. Such a Clodsire, while it's not a bad Pokemon by any stretch of the imagination, it's just, is there. It's not going to leave because it offers something that's a unique niche that Great Tusk cannot fill. But as for the rest of these guys, Great Tusk just does it better. And when you add Gliscor into the mix, and Gliscor does everything that Landorus does, but slightly better, I don't see Landorus sticking around in the OU tier. That's just me, though. In national decks, Tinglu is UU. Garchomp is almost UU in this generation. And Clodsire I could see also falling down to UU, but I think it could still see usage in OU for sure. I think it's going to be Gliscor, Great Tusk, and then I guess Clodsire as the main bulky ground types. And as for the rest of the Pokemon here, Crawdaunt is scary because it's got adaptability. We'll see how big of a deal that really ends up being, because Basculegion also has adaptability, and this is basically just a different version of Basculegion. But you do have Knockoff as a move, and that is more spammable than Shadow Ball even. So, decent Pokemon for sure. You also have Priority, which is pretty big. Melodic is pretty nice for the lower tiers. I'm always a big fan of using Melodic on my teams. And I think Terra is an interesting thing for Melodic, because as a bulky water type, you have a role that you got hired, right? I put you on the team specifically to be a bulky water type. So why would I ever want to tear you out of that? But I could tear you out of that. And competitive Melodic specifically to get a little bit stronger in a tier that maybe has Intimidate. I don't really think any Pokemon currently have Intimidate in the lower tiers, but if that were a thing, besides Masquerain, then you could maybe see a more offensive Melodic, and you get coverage with Terra Blast is the main point I want to drive home. With Terra Blast, you get coverage, and Melodic has always struggled with coverage. Now, technically, you could run Terra Dragon with Dragon Pulse, but that's not good coverage. You want to maybe become a bulky Fairy type, and then you get Terra Blast Fairy, which sounds painful to even just say out loud, but that is an option. Otherwise, you could maybe run Terra Fire, even if you wanted to beat the grass types or something. I don't know. I don't really see Melodic getting much use out of Terra, but it could be sort of interesting. And then Vikavolt. I'm pretty excited to see Vikavolt back. I really like Vikavolt as a Pokemon, and I hope they didn't get rid of too many of its moves. That's all I gotta say about Vikavolt. Quickly, let's go into the Indigo Disc. We got Terapagos. We still don't know anything about this Pokemon besides the fact that it has the potential pre-evolution. And besides that, we've got a Alolan Exeggutor showing up in the terrarium, which is sort of interesting. And I guess that just confirms that all of the Alolans will come back for these guys. And Exeggutor is just doing his own thing. Flygon is pretty fun. They showed off Terra Fire Flygon in the trailer, and I think that just goes to show how much Flygon really wants to Terra. You got Gardevoir coming in on you, and it's just completely walling you. You do like 20% from U-turn, and then Gardevoir is beating you 1v1. But now if I can Terra, and I can either force the Terra from Gardevoir, or I can just beat it 1v1, that'd be fantastic. So I think that Flygon will be a pretty fun Terra user. Apparently Melodic got on his list twice. I don't know why. Metagross is a pretty interesting Pokemon coming back. I don't know what moves it's going to retain from Gen 8. Gen 8, it was running a really weird special bulky set with Iron Defense, Stored Power, and Body Press. I think that's sort of whack. I hope that it doesn't continue to run that set. I hope it goes back to Meteor Mash. But that's just me. The Zebstrika I'm sort of excited for, just because it had Overheat and Flamethrower before, and I sort of want to see what it can do with Terra Fire. As sort of like I always beat grass types Pokemon with Sap Sipper. That could be sort of fun. Whimsicott's an annoying Pokemon, but glad to see it back. Chinchino, Terra Normal Tail of Slap sounds extremely frustrating as you miss your 85% move. Reuniclus, now basically just a worse version of Mousehold. Reuniclus is going to be pretty scary with Terra and Terra Blast fighting. You can Terra Blast Fairy, and all of a sudden this Pokemon is going to be really annoying two of the best abilities in the game, and overall just a really fat Pokemon that can do a lot of work with Terror, because normal like Mono Psychic is a really bad typing. So you give it Mono something else, like Mono literally almost any other typing besides Psychic, and it becomes so much more tanky. Golurk, always fun to have No Guard Golurk back. And Meowstic is a cute Pokemon, but pretty irrelevant. And Alcremie is back too, which means that I'm not sure. I guess we still have the Day-Night Cycle and we can still spin in circles. That's all you need for Alcremie. Yeah. Alright. I talked mostly about Landorus in this video, which is sort of funny. But that's really all I was thinking about when it came to this trailer. There wasn't a whole ton that they showed off. There wasn't very many customization options. There wasn't too much other information other than here's a few Pokemon that you can see. And here are a few trainers that you probably won't care about. We didn't get too much in the way of story or anything like that. So not too much else to talk about. Anyway, that'll be it for today. I'll catch you guys next time.